Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Released in 2011, it was directed by Rupert Wyatt, stars James Franco, Andy Serkus, and Frieda Pinto. This movie is about evolution? Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 13-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. I did not see the OG Planet of the Apes, and I think, Matt, you made some comments as we were watching this. Did this follow like the path of the original movies or the original movie, or
it doesn't follow? Well, it doesn't follow the path of the original movies as much as there's Easter eggs in it that are callbacks to the original movie. So obviously from the Icarus mission, which was the mission that Charlton Heston and the crew were on in the original movie. Mm-hmm. And then some of the names for the chimpanzee. So like the orangutan was, Cornelius, which was one of the names of the orangutans in the original movie. Mm-hmm. I think there was Cornelia, which was another one of the main apes from the original one. So like there's little like Easter eggs. And then the stuff that's mentioned in the original one, they kind of stayed true with this one. So like the whole Genesis, like even back then, they're like, well, the original ape was Caesar, and this is what happened, very vaguely rose up against the humans and all that kind of stuff. This definitely kind of touched on. So obviously whoever wrote this was very aware of at least that first movie, if not the rest of them. So very nice little callbacks.
To me, it expanded it even more. Like in the original 68 movie, I think the year was, all the humans are mute, but they don't really explain it, right? And this movie kind of explained it better, and they call it like the simian flu.
Yes and no, because technically even in the later movies, they're still, they're still humans, normal or whatever. I think that the implications here is that it thinned the numbers out with this to completely it wiped out like probably like 99%. I can't remember in the sequels, they talk about the actual numbers, but wipes out like enough of the people. And then I think it was just a gradual process over hundreds of years without education and everything else that they just lost the ability to really, like they always could, because I vaguely remember there was like underground humans.
Didn't the woman say something at some point?
Yeah. It's not that they couldn't. It was just like literally like there was no system or anything. They basically devolved, right? To the point where they couldn't speak. So
sure. Okay.
Bobby, you gave me a very distinct boo when I said I hadn't seen the original. So are you saying this is something I have to go watch, the OG film?
I just, one thing this movie did for me was really get me into the whole like mythos of it, as there being all these other stories and all these other movies. And for like a lot of these movies, I think, oh man, like it would be awesome if there was so many more to watch. And for this one, there's like 10 other movies. So like there's all sorts of stuff to watch. So, I mean, I very vividly remember watching some of the other ones. It's got really famous twists and special effects and stuff. And that like heyday of the physical makeup and stuff, like all these new ones, they go to the CG, but like all those like the ones that are super old, like they won special awards for how breakthrough all their makeup was and all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of stuff is neat to watch.
Well, I guess if we talk super old, is this movie considered a reboot of the franchise? And I only ask this because there was a 2001 film, right, with Mark Wahlberg?
No, yeah, that one was, I would call that one like a reboot of sorts. I can't remember for the life of me if he was supposed to be Charlton Heston's character or not, but it was supposed to be like a different take on it, because I can't even call that one like a one for one. They went in different directions where he actually was on a different planet. And
oh, right. He flew to Earth and then went to like the Lincoln Memorial.
Well, at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
And he had like the I can't remember which character had taken over, but the general or whatever. This one, I don't know. I wouldn't consider this a reboot, to be honest, because it honestly doesn't, from what I remember, it doesn't conflict with anything that was in the original Planet of the Apes. This very much is a prequel. Yeah. Without changing anything. So I think we can safely say this is a prequel, and honestly, probably one of the better prequels when you really think about it, Like I can't think of very many prequels that actually do a decent job of being like this movie could be a standalone. You could never have watched the original Planet of the Apes and you would have been fine. You could follow you can follow the throughput of it from this one to the, you know, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War of the Planet of the Apes. You can watch that as a trilogy. And obviously, you know, the new one, Kingdom, coming out, I assume it hasn't been released as of right now, but you know, you can watch those and you can enjoy the Easter eggs, but it doesn't necessarily like require you to watch it. And it's so separated where it's not like, I feel like there's some prequels where you're just kind of, even like you look at like Star Wars, you're just watching Anakin trying to get him to be Darth Vader. Right. Mm-hmm. Sure. And so you're ticking boxes to get to where the first movie started. This movie, because none of the characters in it were physically in the original, you're not required, because there was still like hundreds or thousands of years difference between this movie and Planet of the Apes. So you're not really hindered by that, other than the little rebellion, the the name Caesar. That's really it. So they're able to be their own standalone movie. Like this probably could have ended with just this movie and it probably would have been fine. Right. You could have, you got all the hints for where it potentially could go and that would have been okay. So this honestly was a really solid prequel. I don't even know if I can think of any other prequels that work this well.
I don't know that one is necessarily coming to mind, but I think we can get into some character stuff here. You know, we've probably watched a lot of movies with James Franco. Do you, Bobby, were you sold on him being a doctor as Will Rodman or whatever he was, scientist?
I mean, I think he did okay.
Alzheimer's cure finder.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did good. I mean, he definitely, like, I could see him, like, being shifty, like how he was, you know, like stealing medicine and lying to his girlfriend and doing all that kind of stuff. Like the doc, and I think he did pretty decent job on the doctor. But where I thought he did pretty good was, like, in the eyes of, like, just kind of showing this, like, regret towards the end of, like, oh man, this was my fault. I messed up. Like, I see there's some kind of problem here. And I think he did a pretty good job of showing, like, the anguish of this character, you know, watching his dad suffer through Alzheimer's and then losing Caesar and then trying to get him back and then seeing, like, he really went through the ringer in this series or in this movie. I thought he did a pretty decent job.
You know, Matt, if you're looking at it from the perspective of what would we do for our family, right? If you could create an experimental drug, would you dose your ailing family member with it with limited testing?
With limited testing? I mean, I get, you know, if there's, you know, like literally they're on death's door.
He's going to die anyway.
Wow. Wow. I don't want Bobby on that ethics committee. He could have been writhing in pain for the rest of his life, but Bobby's like, he's going anyways. Technically, we're all going. So Bobby, like, really, I mean, is there a difference? I mean, give it now, later.
See, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I do think that, like, in the context of you've got nothing left to lose, I do think that there's an argument of consent there with his dad, like, not actually agreeing to it. I mean, you get to see him later on disagreeing to it. Yeah. So it really calls into question.
Right. So I wonder if they did that on purpose, right? Like, showing, like, look, you don't need to do this.
I mean, yes, because you talked about his character, you know, growing in a sense or having regret over the actions that he took. But for the whole point of it, I mean, we start this movie with him basically going, I've got to cure my CEO, rich money bags man, and testing be damned. Let's put it in a human. Like, it was so aggressive and non-scientific. How's that?
I think that's where...
No, okay, maybe I'm not the one who's out here asking for the 15-hour version of this movie where it's trial test after trial test.
I think that
look at the very beginning with the one successful version that died. You know, so it was like from the very beginning, it was just all downhill.
I mean, she was protecting her baby.
I mean, I at least understand. I think that from a screenwriting point of view, they did a good job. I don't know if I'm entirely sold on him being a doctor. as unfair. Like I know he's. If I remember correctly, he has a master's degree. Like the dude went to Harvard or whatever. So like he's educated, but you know,
UCLA,
it's really hard to look past his past characters. I mean, it's not as bad, but it'd be like if Stifler was in this role. It'd be really hard to look past his past characters, but at least they did a good job in the script itself, establishing his stake in this and the imminence of why he would rush it and to do the careless thing. Cause almost everything he does is careless in this for the most part. The only thing that I'll give him credit for as a character is that he did become a father figure for Caesar. And he decently took care of Caesar for the most part. I question the line between whether or not he was a pet or not, to be honest. He calls himself his father, but
yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, if he was just using him as like a medical for gain, I don't think he would have been as, he kind of seemed kind of caring. I don't think he would have been as caring and tried to learn the sign language and do all that kind of stuff as well. I mean, obviously there was that scientific motivation for him and for curing his dad, but I think it did actually go beyond that a bit. But I do think that the final moments was a little bit weird, where when he said, you know, come home, and then he said, I am home, he's just like, yeah, okay. You know, there's no like, hey, I love you, you know, like there was the I'm sorry, this is my fault, but it just seemed a little rushed to me. It was just like, okay, bye.
Chimpanzee talking to me would probably throw me for a loop too.
Right, but I mean like,
if all of a sudden your dog walks up and is like, I want food, you wouldn't be thrown off at least he looked thrown off. And he's probably like, okay.
Well, if we think about where Caesar's tie to Will breaks, isn't it specifically, like, to me, the moment where they would bring him into the redwoods, but the point where Will and Caroline are kissing on the blanket and Caesar looks down, and that feels like where the attachment gets broken. And then immediately in that scene thereafter, he sees, you know, a dog on a leash and he's like, am I just a dog on a leash? Right? Isn't that the real breaking point?
It's definitely where I think because he also immediately falls up. He gets into the the back end seat rather than in the trunk, right? So it's where he's trying to stop it. Because I mean, at that point, he's pretty much walking full upright already. So I think that's where because then right afterwards, he's like, well, what am I? You know, he went into his existential mode, right? Like, who is Caesar? What is Caesar?
Emo Caesar.
Like he needed to know who he was. You know, I guess up until the point he didn't really consider something like that. And so he started like, you know, I'm sure there's a psychology term for it where like, you know, he's like, well, I'm not that, but I'm not you either. So what am I? So yeah, I mean, I don't know more. Why was it that the girlfriend never bothered to ask, like, hey, why is the chimpanzee really smart?
Yeah,
this seems weird.
That kind of bugged me. Like, she didn't seem to answer it, like ask any questions, like, where did he come from? Like, why do you have this? Like, I mean, at least that they didn't, like, there just seemed to be like a lot of red flags going on there for me.
I mean, she came in to help Caesar out with a scraped knee and just kind of said, oh, I guess I will go on a date with you, stranger man who brought me this monkey. Maybe we know each other because I'm a vet, but why? Oh, because I'm taking your monkeys to do lab experiments on them. So I'm a great ethical human being myself. Like the whole thing, their relationship does seem a bit odd, but the movie doesn't really lean into it, right? It just kind of, they're there, then they're together, and then they stay together. And then she says, getting back to the end piece, she like wishes him good luck, and then we don't see her again, right?
I mean, I assumed that they would meet up again after that, but then the whole end of the world happens. So,
right.
I mean, maybe not. I mean, I guess she did sacrifice herself in a sense of trying to distract so he could get through. But
no, so she was probably put in jail.
Well, after everything that happened, I'm pretty sure that was probably the least of the police's worries. But
right.
I mean, my assumption would be that, you know, after that, there's probably a lot of conversation and stuff that probably happened. But to be honest, like you said, you don't want the 15-hour version of this. Her it was a Caesar and his story, Will. It was about them. It was basically, at that point, is a father-son moment. So her being there wouldn't have really added anything.
Right.
The side mother. The thing though, let's talk about Caesar. Obviously, the whole point of the film was watching this primate grow from baby monkey ape that is intelligent into this amazing leader of species and figuring out all the shenanigans that make humans weird. Andy Serkis, man. How do you feel about Andy Serkis?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see where Andy Serkis begins and ends and the other people begin and end, because it seems like there was like a whole collaboration. Like, one thing that the movie did really, really well for me is that I basically forgot it was like a CG. I mean, I didn't really forget, but like I stopped paying attention to the CG animation like pretty early on. And I was like, okay, I'm just invested in this character and what they're showing, not thinking like, oh, this is completely animation, because it was so convincing for me. But I mean, like, I think that the whole team did a really great job.
Matt, do you feel the same way? I have a note on this, so I want to see how you respond. How do you feel about the CGI?
About the CGI, I mean, I'd say it's probably about 60-40 for me, 60% in the sense of it was really solid. And there were scenes where, honestly, if you would have told me that they had real chimpanzees on set, I'd believe you.
Yeah, sure.
Especially at the beginning. I mean, that opening shot of them in the jungle, it was really solid up until, and I feel like this was the consistent indicator. There was high action. As soon as there was a lot of action, a lot of movement, it fell apart pretty quick. But whenever it was like either stationary or even slow motion, not slow motion as in like Zack Snyder's, like, moving slowly.
Yeah.
It was really solid. But as soon as they picked up pace, it started looking a little bit, I think I said a couple times, Jumanji-ish. Like, it just wasn't holding up as well. But it was only during those scenes, the rest of them, like the end scene with Caesar and Will or whatever, like, I mean, it was borderline amazing, the detail. And it wasn't too much detail either. I feel like whenever you try to put too many pores and hairs in something, you lose it. And I think that there is the benefit that they're not human. I feel like we're way more judgmental about seeing CG humans than we are about something like this.
Sure.
Yeah.
But even then, I think it was pretty amazing.
But this has all the things that are hard, right? Like hair and all that eyes and all those like facial tics and emotions and talking and all that kind of stuff.
That's the weird thing when you really think about it, because they nailed all that. But as soon as they started running, it started falling apart. Like, I don't know if it was they overestimated the motion blur. Maybe on a giant screen, it sold better. But on my screen, I'm like, it just wasn't holding up as well. And that might have been fixed in the later movies. It's 2011. I mean, I feel like,
I mean, Jurassic Park came out in...
I knew you were going to say that. I knew. It always falls back to Jurassic Park.
I think for me, Bobby, what you mentioned was the note that I totally took down. It just makes you forget that you're watching CGI. And that's kind of a special thing to be in that zone of not thinking about either how cartoony it is and really just kind of falling into the movie. Which one of you two is a self-proclaimed Jane Goodall expert who knows the primate, how primates actually act in real life? Hey, either of you? Anyone? No.
My knowledge is about as far as like the movie Congo, I guess. But
so, like, one of the questions I wrote is like, are we actually seeing, the way they presented the primates and how Caesar does things? Is this tied to how they actually act in the wild, or are we just seeing writers and human personification just slapped onto everything because he's becoming more human-like?
I mean, it looked pretty believable to me most parts. I mean, there's some parts where they kind of stretched for plot, but I think that for the most part, it looked believable. Like, I know the whole sign language thing, and it's probably realism times a little bit stretched to make
Mm-hmm.
the story work. But I mean, it seemed pretty realistic to me for some of it.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking through is as we watch the different actions play out, especially when he first enters the compound or the reserve or whatever, the place where they treat the animals terribly. Um, and them going through
Poor Caesar, man. Trauma after trauma.
going through the battles of who's going to be top monkey in the top ape in the crew there, and it just was just like, well, how much of this is how they act in real life? Getting what'd you say, getting pedicures and manicures, Matt, the the OG king of that place.
I can remember what his name was. Was it like Alpha or something? I can't even remember what that character's name was. But yeah,
is that Koba?
No. Koba was the lab. That's the one that was all like disfigured,
he was a
and
messed
stuff
up
like
face. And then one of them was named Rocket.
Maybe it was Rocket. Maybe it was the one that he was like beefcake, right? Like he was like pretty huge, but he's also balding, so he probably was taking steroids. Yeah, like no, he was up on that Pride Rock or whatever, getting his fingers manicured by, I'm guessing his side chicks or whatever,
his concubines.
Yeah.
And I also wondered in terms, because you could tell I'm just coming from a place of no knowledge here. In my head, orangutans are like a soft, gentle species, and this one got down big time.
I mean, that's the way they portrayed it here. But I don't know how in your head they're like the soft, gentle ones. I mean, maybe it's because their eyes are a little bit more sympathetic looking.
Oh, I just feel like when I see videos of them, I don't know that I've ever seen an aggressive one. How's that for my answer?
I don't know. Yeah, King Louis was orangutan, so and he was a pretty bad guy.
He just wanted to be human.
This is true. You're not wrong. He just wanted man's fire.
So, were you surprised with how quickly they had Caesar speak?
I thought it was built up quite a while, to be honest. I mean, I feel like this was kind of like my thing about this movie, watching it again. I realized like how long it takes to get to the rebellion and how quickly it happens. Like it's literally like second, third act at that point when it really happens, because he doesn't really speak until they really bust out. But I guess at that point it's earned, because you kind of see, it's I mean, it's the, Shawshank Redemption record player moment, right? Where like he stands up for himself for the first time and he asserts dominance and takes out Malfoy.
Yes, he does.
I still argue, I don't know why he was in there in the first place, but yeah, there was no spell to get him out of that one. I guess Daddy wasn't able to save him from there, but
was it Expelliarmus? What is it?
Primitivius.
Give it to Malfoy. Give it to him. One of the things I think we briefly, maybe Matt, you mentioned this, and I think it's kind of a good conversation to have. Obviously, using apes and the closeness I think we can associate with them as humans, and the way they act and perceive things and whatever. I know we're closer to pigs on a DNA scale. That's a whole probably different conversation.
Poor pigs can get sunburned.
This concoction is given to apes. Do you think there's a better species that should have received this? And what would you like? What other planet of the creatures would you actually want to see? Who would have been better than apes?
Oh man, that's tough.
Octopuses.
What?
As far as I know, they already win at everything.
I know.
They're already
we just
smart.
happen to be able to like kill them.
Oh man, I don't know. Like, what would be a species that isn't already smart that I'd want to see like to the level of being able to take over the earth? Maybe
even if they are smart, yeah.
Oh man. I mean, it'd be
pandas or something funny.
Wait, you said pandas are funny?
They're kind of goofy. They like fall down and stuff,
Like, I guess the thing that I'm trying to imagine is what would be the most terrifying, like the scene where you see Caesar after he's gassed the rest of the primates in the sanctuary or whatever, and they're all having the union meeting or whatever together. I'm trying to imagine which animal, if all of a sudden I was walking and I just saw a bunch of them conversing together, and then as I walk by they stop and start looking at me, would I be terrified? I don't know.
You mentioned tigers.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's
Even cats would terrify me if that happened.
Yeah.
Like you imagine like it's dark and you're walking, all of a sudden you're like meow 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 meow, and then you walk by and they stop and then turn around and like just start looking at you. Like I guess I'd be more terrified by things that like would be more everyday. Like you know, I guess with chimpanzees, I think it's, a scenario where it's actually pretty interesting because they are so strong and powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would have to be something more everyday, like a cat or a dog. That would be interesting. But I think the fact that they are primates and they are very human, it makes it even scarier in that sense.
I mean, one of the things that I like about it being a primate is that like people tend to treat their cats and dogs pretty well. They live at home with them. But the thing about these primates with monkeys and chimpanzees and stuff is that they're basically in animal jail, right? Zoos. And they're, at least in this movie, treated relatively poorly, right? So it's like, I mean, like, let's say in an alternate reality, and it wasn't just trauma after trauma after trauma for poor Caesar, he's at a nice, non-unethical pharmaceutical company, and they're treating him really, really well. Does he still rebel because he's smart and he's like, oh, I like this? Or does he?
Yes, because you shouldn't subject people to experiments without the ability to consent. And even if they do consent, you probably still shouldn't subject people to experiments.
They didn't need to treat him like crap at every single turn. Like everybody, like everybody he meets treats him like crap. He could have been treated nicely and same result.
Well, he was treated nicely by Will.
I mean, he's the only one, but even with Will, he was a little bit like, I'm kind of like a pet here.
Well, we harm what we fear, right? As humans, I think if I was going, when I think of you mentioned the tigers, I'm going with lions only because then we could have real life Lion King, right? That would happen, right? At that point, even though I just called it a very sad Disney movie. It gets good at the end. Simba grows up. No, all right.
He gets his montage.
Were you satisfied with the ending of this one as they rose?
Yeah, I think it left off in a good place. I think that like I said, it's a pretty solid standalone movie. If they, for whatever reason, this movie came out at a bad time or something and it had, relatively bombed, I think that it does a good arc for the characters and it establishes enough to get you to kind of understand where it goes. Again, if you didn't know anything about this franchise, like if you put this movie in front of, somebody who is significantly younger, born in 2000, whatever, they watched this movie for the first time at like age 12, 13. They didn't know anything about Charlton Heston or Rodney or any of those guys or whatever. I think it would be a satisfying enough movie with that. And I think the way the movie ends is hopeful for the apes and terrifying for the humans.
Right. I was going to say, like, Bobby, are you okay with it turning into a pandemic film?
Yes, I liked that. Especially like the fact that they did a good job of having the guy, David Hewlett, be kind of like a jerk, but he got totally messed with and beat up the whole movie. Like after he picked on Caesar, then Caesar beat him up, then he just had problems left and right with that neighbor there. And I was amused by that. I was amused by his suffering.
You just said yes to the killing off of all the humans. That's what I just heard. Dang it, Bobby. Let the humans live. Let them live.
No, I mean, by the end of it, I was like, I'm kind of going for the apes here.
Oh man, I mean that's definitely what they're aiming for. Well, we know there's more in the series, and I anticipate that we definitely need to watch the others. We'll do the usual right now. Bobby, are you recommending Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
I liked it a lot. I really got into it. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. I mean, it's a little bit tough. I'm thinking about my wife, who's like an animal lover through and through. And I really think that she would have a really hard time with this movie because poor Caesar is just oppressed. Mm-hmm. They don't treat the animals very well in this movie at all. And it's a little bit I don't know. I wouldn't say hard to watch, but it gets to be a little bit much at times. And then by the end, I'm like, yes, Revolution, let's go.
I take it Guardians was not on the watching list.
No, it was not.
Okay. Matt, are you recommending Rise of the Planet of the Apes?
This guy. Yeah, no, 100%. I think that it's a solid movie. I think that the pacing's pretty good. I think it has a nice emotional roller coaster that you go through. It honestly does a good job on establishing connection to the non-human characters. I mean, they have parts in it, but they never outshine the CG characters, which is funny saying that you connect with CG characters. Yeah, I think that this is a good movie to watch. I think that the trilogy honestly is a good movie to watch. If you haven't seen it, this is a good starting point. Watch it. And then when the next one comes out, watch that one too. I think that, you can't really go wrong with it.
And watch the old ones, Austin.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, of all of the movies, this could be my favorite of the Planet of the Apes, but I need to see the others to really stack up against it. No, I definitely, I'm in consensus here recommending this movie. It's one where I think it hits all the popcorn hangout, easy to watch, but also hits with that deepness because you really do care about the progression of Caesar and eventually, yes, cheering the rise of the Planet of the Apes. Dang humans. It's absolutely entertaining and definitely worth watching. So yes, go ahead and watch it, and I'll watch the old one, Bobby, and then I'll give an update, and we can see how I feel about it. As always, thank you for listening, and remember, Caesar is home.